Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello dear students, welcome to another lecture. In this lecture, we are going to begin with the first poem of class 9th alternative English, which is a sonnet to science. Now we all know what is a sonnet. A sonnet is a poem which is written in 14 lines. Now this sonnet, this poem has been addressed to science. Now why science? Our poet Edgar Allan Poe, he has accused science, he has blamed science for being so observational that according to him, science has taken away the charm of imagination, the charm of thinking, the charm of believing in things which actually are not true. You know, as kids, if I tell you in the simplest of languages, as kids, our grandparents would usually narrate to us wonderful fairy tales. We all know those fairy tales are not true, but we still loved to listen to them and we believed in them. Why? Because they gave us happiness, they gave us refreshment, they gave us peace. But according to the poet Allan Poe, he is very unhappy with the advancement that science has brought into a man's life. He is very unhappy with all the technological developments that have taken place, because it is because of science that there is a reason behind everything. There is a fact, there is a logic behind everything, and it is because of science that all the fairy tales or all the things that you once imagined to be true have now become totally untrue and null and void. So, with the help of this poem, our poet is simply blaming science for being so peering, for having such a keen eye that, it never misses on any fact or any explanation. So we are going to read about why was the poet so unhappy with the advancements that took place in science. But before that, let us read something about the poet. So Edgar Allan Poe, he was an American author, he was a critic. Who is a critic? Somebody who finds errors, in somebody else's work. And he was a part of the Romantic movement in America that included the writers like Emerson, Thoreau, Irving, Melville, Hawthorne, Longfellow, and Whitman. Poe was always engaged with society and he always gave expression to his opinions. So whatever opinions, whatever hopes, whatever apprehensions, whatever doubts he had, he always, that he could find in the society, he always gave way to them through his writing. Considered the master of the American short story. So he was considered the master of the American short story. Poe's fiction abounds with mystery tales and the gothic, so whatever stories he's written, they always had something mysterious, something gothic, horror in them. Poe is also considered as the inventor of detective fiction, the detective stories. Poe's work include classical literary classics such as The Telltale Heart, The Raven, and The Fall of the House of Usher. Now, like many of his characters, Poe is seen as a mysterious figure with a fascination for death and gloom. So this poet, he was very much interested in death and gloom. The majority of information which is available about Poe is the product of a biography written after his death in order to defame him. Defame him means to bring down somebody's popularity. And as a result, it is largely untrue. So whatever is written about Poe after his death is very much untrue in nature. So let us read this poem now. Okay. Science, true daughter of old time thou art. So, the first word of the poem in itself is an interjection. He is straightaway addressing the science. And how is he addressing the science? As the daughter of the old time. So, daughter of the old time means somebody who does not believe in giving way to the imaginations and the new visions and the new, creativity of the people. So, the poet has started with his blame on the science with the very first line itself. He calls science as the daughter of the old time. He says, who alterest all things with thy peering eyes? This is the old English word. Peering eyes means that science, is such that there is nothing which cannot be validated by science. No matter what the situation may be, there would be some fact, there would be some logic behind the occurrence of that situation, some scientific observation, some scientific explanation will always be found by it. So, who alterest all things? Alterest means changed. The poet tells science that you have changed everything around you. How? Because you have found the explanation, the logic behind everything. Why preyest thou thus upon the poet's heart? You. Preyest. Preyest word is derived from the word prey. Prey means somebody who you are going to attack. So, the poet calls science, or rather asks science, that why are you attacking the heart of a poet? Why does he say so? Because a poet is believed to be somebody who has the richest imagination, who has the richest creativity that one can think of. So, according to the poet, now that science is getting so popular among the people, nobody believes in what the poet writes, because they all want to find logic in that. And therefore, the poet is questioning science, that why did you attack a poet? He also calls science as a vulture. Vulture is a bird, that big bird of prey, whose wings are dull realities. So the poet has here compared science to a vulture. So a comparison is drawn, but there is no usage of like or as. And what is this poetic device? Metaphor. So the poet has compared science to a vulture who has big observational eyes, who looks at everything and finds a logic, who has big wings. But according to the poet, these wings are dull realities. Why dull? Because thinking about or being in the world of imagination, being in the world of fairies is something that fascinates us all. But the moment we derive the truth behind those stories, it obviously becomes very boring. That is why, according to the poet, science is like a vulture who has big eyes and always attacks the poet. But he also feels that the science is very dull and it brings dullness into one's life. How should he love thee, or how deem thee wise? He over here refers to the poet himself. The poet is asking science that how should I love you? How do you think I will accept you? How deem thee wise? How will I consider you as wise? How will I consider you as intelligent? Who wouldst not leave him in his wandering to seek for treasure in the jeweled skies? Wandering means roaming around aimlessly. You know, a poet is always expected to explore nature to its fullest. A poet derives inspiration from the nature by roaming around here and there, by looking at the sky. Looking at the sky is a treasure house for a poet because according to him, all the stars, the moon that one can see in the sky are like jewels. So a poet cherishes such things, and with the help of these things, the poet ends up writing poetry. But science has given a logic to everything, as I told you. So therefore, the poet is very unhappy with science, and he asks science that since you have taken away my charm, you have taken away the happiness that I derived when I would roam around in the forest or when I would look into the sky, how do you think I will love you? How do you think will I accept you? Albeit he soared with an undaunted wing. Albeit, despite the fact that science is present all around us, that science gives us logic in everything, despite that, the poet says that he always soars high, he always rises high with his undaunted wing, undaunted, fearless. The poet tells science that I am not scared of you. You might be intimidating, you might be scary for others when you offer them an explanation behind everything. But I am not affected, I am not scared by you at all. Hast thou not dragged Diana from her car? Now, who is Diana? Diana is the goddess who in the earlier time was believed that she would sit in her cart, in her chariot, and would drive by the moon. Okay, so this is something which persisted, which existed in mythological stories or in the stories that we loved to listen to as kids. But the poet says that you are the one who has dragged Dinah. Dragged means who has actually pushed Dinah out of her cart. Why did he say so? Because now that we learn science, we know that there is nothing as Dinah. There is nobody who exists as Dinah. There is no logical, there is no scientific explanation behind this character named Dinah. And since Dinah does not exist according to science, obviously existence of Dinah is in shreds now. And driven the Hamadryad from the wood. Hamadryad is a forest nymph. Nymph means fairy. So Hamadryad is a fairy which was believed to live in the forests, in the trees. Okay. As kids, we have usually heard these stories that in every tree lives a fairy. If we cut the tree, the fairy will also die. But now that we are grown up, now that the impact of science is so great, we understand the logic behind the growth of the tree. We understand that there is no fairy that lives inside a tree. And that is why the poet says that you are the one who has driven, who has taken out the story of Hamadryad from the forests. To seek a shelter in some happier star. So he asks science that why do you not let people seek shelter in some happier star? What does he mean by it? Again, just imagine, and this is something that we all love to do. At night, when the weather is very pleasant, go onto the roof, lie down, look at the stars. I'm sure each one of us derives happiness. Each one of us derives solace. Each one of us derives pleasure in doing that. But now the poet is asking science that since you have taught everybody the reason behind the twinkling of the stars or maybe the moon, we know the scientific reason behind them. And so when we lie down beneath the starry sky, we don't get the same happiness that we used to get earlier. So why have you done this to us? This is what the poet asks science. Hast thou not torn the Naiad from her flood? Now, just like we have talked about the forest nymph, Naiad is the fairy of flood. Flood refers to river. So, a fairy who would live in the water bodies. Okay. Again, earlier it was believed that there was a water fairy that was found in the water bodies. But now, because of science, we don't know that exists. We know that does not exist. And that is why the poet says that you have torn the Naiad. You have taken out the soul of Naiad from her water bodies by telling people that it does not exist. The elfin from the green grass. Elfin are the fairies that are found in the grass. Okay, small dwarfs basically. Okay, people who are short-heighted that can be seen in the grass. So, you have taken away Diana from the moon. You've taken away Hamadryad from the trees. You've taken away Naiad from the waters. And you have taken away Elfin from the grass by telling people that none of these characters exist in reality. But from me, the summer dream beneath the tamarind tree. Not only is the poet talking about things in general, but he is specifically complaining science for having taken away from him the pleasure that he derived when during the summers he would lie down beneath the tamarind tree and he would dream. So the pleasure, the happiness that he got by lying down beneath the tamarind tree, by imagining things, by thinking about these fairies and the beautiful nature, science, by putting in logic, has taken away the entire pleasure from the poet. And this is the complaint that the poet has made to science. So, my dear students, through this poem, Sonnet to Science, the poet has made multiple blames onto science. Let us recap that. So first, he calls science as the daughter of old time. He blames, or rather I would say, he compares science with a vulture who has big eyes, who has big wings. Because of his eyes, because of the observational skills of science, it has changed everything around it, and specifically the science has attacked the heart of a poet by putting logic in everything that a poet thinks. But still, the poet says to science that you have given reality to the people which is very dull and boring. He then talks to science and asks science that how do you think I will accept you? Why will I consider you as intelligent? Because for me, you have taken away the treasure, you have taken away the pleasure I would derive when I would roam around in the forest or I would look at the sky full of stars. Because now I know the reason, the facts behind it. He also tells science that although you have tried to intimidate me, you have tried to make me feel scared, but I am not afraid of you. He then tells Science that you are the one who has actually taken away all the beautiful, all the creative stories. Diana, who was believed to be the fairy of the moon, you have told people that this character does not exist. Hamadryad, the fairy who was found in the woods, in the forests, people know nobody like this exists. You have taken away the beauty of the belief that people had in elves, the ones they were found in the grasses, and also Naiad, the fairy of the water. Moreover, the poet is specifically annoyed with Science because now he does not get the same pleasure, the same happiness that he derived earlier when he would lie down under the tamarind tree during the summers. So this, my dear students, was the sonnet that poet Edgar Poe had written to Science.